Now we're going to have a look at the macro controls and some further MIDI control. Now the header up here includes some parameters that we can use to affect the synthesis parameters. Now some of these have their own assignments as well, for example pitch bend, and that will correspond to the pitch bend wheel on your synthesizer or your keyboard controller. And then we have a modulation wheel here as well, and aftertouch. Now if your keyboard can transmit aftertouch, you can use this in order to affect parameters as well. And then we have the macro controls that you'll know from Massive 1 if you use Massive 1. Now these allow you to control multiple parameters using one knob. And also Massive X, we can actually implement what's called a one-to-one mapping, which means that the knob will actually take over the function of a controller. So first of all, let's just demonstrate using one of these other MIDI controllers to control parameters. So let's assign it to the wavetable position. Let's choose something a little bit more adventurous. Let's try that. Now in this case, we're going to be affecting the pitch and also the wavetable position. So what we need to do is assign an amount, as we would do with our modulation in general. So now we're affecting both pitch bend and also the modulation. Now on this keyboard controller I'm using for these videos, I don't have a pitch bend wheel, so I'm just dragging that, if you're wondering why I'm doing that from there. But if you had a keyboard controller with a pitch bend wheel, obviously you just do that with the pitch bend wheel. Now similarly for modulation, this keyboard controller does not have a modulation wheel, but you'll be able to do that if you have a controller with a modulation wheel, which most do. Okay, let's just right click and delete this assignment here. And let's have a look at our macros now. So these behave in a similar way to the other modulators, but there is a slight difference. If I click and drag and drop this macro onto the control here, this is the one-to-one mapping. So it means the macro has now taken over this knob, so I can control the knob from the macro. I can also do it directly from here as well, but it means that I can control it from this knob here. Now I don't need to necessarily do it that way. I can also click and use a modulation slot from here. And now I have two different modulation assignments. So I'm changing the modulation via macro 2. And I can also change it from macro 1. Okay, so I'm just going to take macro 1 and assign it as a one-to-one mapping once again to wavetable 1. Now I've got wavetable 2 now routed, so we've got two wavetables playing. Now if I was to take this second wavetable position dial and modulate it with macro 1, this menu or this window comes up here saying a one-to-one macro assignment already exists, do you want to change it? Now what this is telling us is at the moment this macro 1 has taken over control of wavetable position dial 1, and by assigning it to the second one I'm overriding that, and it's saying do you want to do that? So I'll say okay, yes I do. So assign an amount. You can hear now it's affecting this second wavetable position. And now by routing it to the first one using the amount slot underneath rather than dragging it directly on, I can actually affect both of them. Let's do them in different directions. Let's just change the wavetable position selection. So we've got a really nice way of having hands-on control of both these wavetable position dials. Okay, let's just delete this assignment. Okay, so let's actually just route the oscillators through the filter. Now when it comes to sidechain modulation, the macros are really good ways of doing that. So let's apply an LFO to affect filter frequency, and let's drag a macro and drop it into the sidechain amount. Bring the amount up. So now using the macro, we can dial in the amount we want. So these are really, really powerful controllers. Let's take this a step further. Let's go to our effects here and add in a reverb. Let's bring the mix down and let's drop the macro onto the reverb mix amount. So now we're affecting the LFO's modulation of the filter frequency and also the amount of reverb. Let's also actually directly affect the filter frequency as well. So we're not only controlling the amount the LFO affects the filter frequency, we're directly opening the filter frequency and controlling the reverb. Let's take it also and control the size parameter as well. And for the hell of it, let's change the color parameter. So you can see how this can get really complex. So with a bit of experimentation, you can get some really, really interesting sounds going with these macro controls and also have great hands-on control. Now, by right-clicking on here, we can actually mute or unmute, and we can also remove all the modulations as well. Okay, let me just drag this on once again. Now, once we have an assignment in here, we can actually go and double-click on the name and rename it so we can keep track of what's doing what. Okay, so that's the macros and the MIDI control of parameters using the pitch bend modulation and aftertouch. Thanks for watching.